The rain fell like shards of broken glass against the city pavement. Chicago's night was cruel, merciless, and so was Daniel Donovan. Inside their apartment, Ava stood trembling, her hands clutching her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, her face pale, eyes filled with disbelief, she watched the man who once vowed eternal love turn into a stranger. "You're nothing but dead weight, Ava," Daniel snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through her heart. "I have a future, a reputation. I can't waste my life on a woman who brings me down." Her lips quivered. "Daniel, I'm carrying your child." But he didn't flinch. Instead, he straightened his tailored suit, fixing his cufflinks as though preparing for the spotlight. "That's your problem, not mine." And then came the final blow. Cassandra, his glamorous young assistant, stepped from the shadows. She smirked at Ava with merciless eyes, her manicured fingers sliding across Daniel's arm. "Hurry up, darling, we'll be late for the gala," she purred, savoring Ava's humiliation. Ava's heart shattered. This was the man she sacrificed everything for, the man she trusted with her life. And now he was discarding her like trash. The storm outside howled as Daniel opened the door. He didn't even bother to look at her. "Don't be here when I get back," he said coldly. Then, with Cassandra on his arm, he stepped out into the flashing headlights of a waiting limousine. The door slammed, leaving Ava standing alone in the silence that was heavier than death itself. For a moment, she could barely breathe. Her knees weakened, her body shivering from the cold draft rushing in through the open doorway. She wanted to scream, to beg, to fall on the floor and never get up again. But a faint kick inside her womb stopped her. The child, innocent, fragile, was still there, reminding her she couldn't collapse. Not yet. The rain soaked her as she stumbled out onto the empty street. Each step echoed like a cruel reminder of her broken marriage, of vows turned into lies. Tears mixed with the storm, and with every drop, her despair deepened. How could love vanish so quickly? How could the man she trusted with her soul cast her aside in her most vulnerable moment? But destiny has its own cruel humor. That night, Ava Donovan lost everything: her home, her marriage, her belief in love. Yet what Daniel never knew, what Cassandra never imagined, was that the woman they abandoned wasn't helpless at all. She carried within her not only a child, but also a secret powerful enough to crush them both. Because Ava Donovan wasn't just a poor, discarded wife. She was the heir to a billion-dollar empire. And soon, the world would tremble when she came back. Ava Donovan was never the kind of woman people noticed twice. At least, that's what everyone believed. She lived quietly, worked in a small bookstore tucked away on a corner street in Chicago, and spent most of her days surrounded by shelves of forgotten stories. Her dresses were plain, her smile gentle, and her eyes carried the softness of someone who thought kindness was enough to survive in this world. To outsiders, she was ordinary. But ordinary was a mask she had chosen to wear. Ava was born into the powerful Mackenzie family, a dynasty whispered about in financial circles from New York to Hong Kong. Her late mother, Margaret Mackenzie, had stepped away from that ruthless empire to give her daughter a normal life. She wanted Ava to know simplicity, to grow up away from boardrooms, media headlines, and the constant pressure of wealth. So Ava grew up in a modest apartment, learned to cook her own meals, worked part-time jobs through school, and never once flaunted the fortune waiting silently in her name. Her father, William Mackenzie, remained a distant shadow. A billionaire investor who built his empire on cold precision, he had long been estranged from Ava and her mother. His world was one of power plays and relentless ambition, while Margaret insisted on love, peace, and anonymity. After Margaret's death 3 years earlier, Ava quietly inherited an estate worth billions, a fortune so vast it could have changed the course of nations. Yet she kept it locked away, untouched, choosing to live as if she were just another struggling young woman in Chicago. That was the Ava Daniel first met. He was charming then, a salesman with a bright smile and dreams that seemed larger than life. When she walked into the dealership to buy a used car, she could have easily purchased the entire building in cash, but she chose not to. She didn't want anyone to know who she truly was. Daniel saw her as simple, unthreatening, someone who would never outshine him. He courted her with flattery, with dinners he could barely afford, with promises that sounded sincere. And Ava, hungry for love after losing her mother, believed him. Within 6 months, they were married. A city hall wedding, modest rings, a honeymoon no farther than a road trip across Illinois. But to Ava it felt magical. She thought she had found a man who loved her not for her wealth, not for her name, but for her soul. When she found out she was pregnant, she wept with joy. Daniel held her then, whispering words of devotion, vowing to be a father, a provider, a husband she could lean on. For a while, she believed him. For a while, she allowed herself to dream. But dreams crack, and slowly Daniel showed his true face. He mocked her for not making enough money at the bookstore. He complained about expenses while secretly indulging himself in fine suits, expensive nights out, and trips she was never invited to. He called her weak when she was sick with morning sickness. He treated her pregnancy not as a miracle, but as a burden. Still, Ava endured. She told herself it was stress, that all marriages had cracks. She prayed for the man she loved to return. And then came that night. The storm, the betrayal, the cruel dismissal. What Daniel never realized, what Cassandra never understood, was that Ava's silence was not weakness. It was restraint. She had the power to destroy them both at any time. Now, with her heart hardened and her secret ready to surface, Ava Donovan was no longer the timid bookstore girl. She was the heiress to an empire. And soon, Daniel would learn that the woman he threw away was the one who held the power to end him. The city sparkled like it had been dipped in gold. Chicago at night was a playground for the powerful. Towering skyscrapers glowing against the dark sky, luxury cars gliding down polished avenues, and gala halls brimming with silk gowns and champagne. It was a world where reputations were made in a single evening and destroyed in a single whisper. This was Daniel Donovan's chosen stage. The Bright Futures Gala was the crown jewel of the season. Held inside the Crystal Renaissance Hotel, a ballroom dripping with opulence. Chandeliers the size of carriages rained light across marble floors, polished until they mirrored the sky. The air was perfumed with imported flowers and expensive cologne. Every corner hummed with the subtle tension of wealth and ambition. Politicians, CEOs, and socialites mingled, laughing over deals worth millions, their voices rising above the orchestra's polished notes. And at the center of it all was Daniel, tall, confident, his tuxedo sharp enough to slice through the room's pretenses. On his arm was Cassandra, radiant in a scarlet gown that clung to her curves, her laughter sharp as broken glass. Guests whispered as they passed, some pretending not to notice, others smirking knowingly. Everyone knew Daniel was married. Everyone knew his wife was home, pregnant. Yet here he was, flaunting his mistress beneath the glittering chandeliers, daring anyone to question him. Cassandra thrived on it. She basked in the stares, the envy, the scandal. To her, this was triumph, a public declaration that she had won. She wasn't just Daniel's assistant anymore. She was his chosen partner, his new trophy. "Smile, darling," she whispered, her hand gripping his arm like a brand. "They're watching." Daniel grinned, raising his champagne flute in a mock toast to the crowd. "Let them. By next year they'll all be begging for my attention." What he didn't know was that attention cuts both ways. Admiration today becomes condemnation tomorrow. And as the cameras flashed, capturing every smirk and every touch, whispers began weaving through the ballroom like smoke. "She's pregnant, isn't she? The wife?" one woman murmured to her husband. "Disgusting. He's parading her like a prize," another whispered, shaking her head. But Daniel didn't care. The more the room buzzed, the taller he stood. He thought he was untouchable, a rising star in Chicago's corporate scene. This was his world, lavish, glittering, and cruel. Far across town, Ava sat alone in her small apartment, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She could almost hear the music drifting through the night, the gala she should have been attending at her husband's side. Once, she had dreamed of being part of that world, not for the wealth, but for the joy of standing next to the man she loved. Now she realized that world had no joy, only masks. Still, fate has a way of turning masks into mirrors. Ava's world and Daniel's world were about to collide again, not as husband and wife, but as enemies. Because while Daniel was busy parading his mistress under the chandeliers, Ava was preparing for something far more powerful than a gala entrance. She was preparing for her rebirth. And the next time she walked into a ballroom like this, she wouldn't come as the timid wife he discarded. She would come as the billionaire heiress ready to burn his empire to the ground. Daniel Donovan wasn't always a villain, Or at least, that's the story he liked to tell himself. He had clawed his way up from nothing, a kid from the wrong side of Chicago with a chip on his shoulder and a hunger that never slept. In his mind, betrayal wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Love wasn't love, it was leverage. And people weren't people, they were stepping stones. By the time he met Ava, he had already grown tired of struggling. She seemed perfect then. Sweet, naive, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. She was never supposed to be more than a quiet wife to dress up his image, someone to soothe his ego at night while he chased bigger dreams. But then came the pregnancy. And suddenly, Daniel felt trapped. Dead weight, he muttered often, even when she wasn't in the room. A bookstore clerk carrying my kid. What future can that give me? Enter Cassandra Moore. She was everything Ava wasn't, flashy, bold, ruthless. With her raven hair and sharp tongue, she knew how to flatter Daniel's ambition while fueling his arrogance. She didn't care about morals or marriage vows. She cared about power, about climbing as fast as he did. Together, they were toxic fuel poured onto a fire. In private, Cassandra laughed about Ava's plain clothes, her quiet ways. She looks like she shops at thrift stores, she sneered, lounging across silk sheets in Daniel's apartment. And she's carrying your baby? God, Daniel, she's gonna drag you down forever. Daniel smirked, sipping his whiskey. Not if I get rid of her first. That was the moment Ava's fate was sealed. To Daniel, a wife was disposable. To Cassandra, a pregnant woman was an obstacle. Neither cared about the consequences because they were too drunk on each other's ambition. At the gala, they worked the room like predators in couture. Cassandra clung to Daniel's arm, whispering poison in his ear, while Daniel promised investors grand deals he had no intention of honoring. He was building castles out of lies, and Cassandra was his willing accomplice. Yet beneath the glitter, cracks were forming. Cassandra's hunger was insatiable. The more Daniel gave her jewels, dresses, vacations, the more she wanted. She didn't just want to be his mistress, she wanted the wife's crown. And Daniel, blind to her ambition, believed he was the one in control. But power is a fickle thing. One moment it makes you king, the next it turns you into a pawn. Behind closed doors, Cassandra pressed him harder. Divorce her. Make it official. With me by your side, we'll rise faster than you ever dreamed. Daniel hesitated only out of vanity. A scandal could damage him. But the temptation was too great. He wanted Cassandra's fire, her youth, her boldness. Ava's quiet devotion no longer satisfied him. He didn't realize that in chasing Cassandra, he was sealing his own downfall. Because Cassandra wasn't loyal to love, she was loyal only to herself. And when the empire began to crumble, she would be the first to run. For now, though, they laughed together, sipping champagne, mocking the wife Daniel had abandoned. She'll beg to come back, Daniel declared smugly. Women like her can't survive without men like me. Cassandra's laughter rang through the ballroom like a warning bell. But fate had already chosen its side, and the woman they dismissed as weak was about to show them strength they couldn't imagine. Because Ava Donovan wasn't coming back to beg, she was coming back to conquer. The whispers began as faint ripples across the glittering ballroom, but soon they swelled into a tide of scandal. Guests at the Bright Futures Gala leaned close, champagne flutes trembling as they gossiped behind manicured hands. Daniel Donovan had done the unthinkable. He had brought his mistress, Cassandra, to one of the city's most prestigious events, flaunting her in front of every investor, every socialite, every reporter with a camera. Isn't his wife pregnant? A woman muttered. 6 months along, I heard. Can you believe it? He doesn't even care. Look at him smiling, as if this is normal. And there he was, Daniel, laughing, posing for photographs, whispering promises to investors while Cassandra clung to his arm like a victory prize. She reveled in the attention, her crimson dress blazing against the chandeliers, her smirk daring anyone to object. For Ava, the betrayal was no longer private. It was public. Merciless. Humiliating. She hadn't meant to come. She told herself she was too weak, too broken, too pregnant to face the spectacle. But something inside her pushed her out the door that night. Maybe it was defiance, maybe desperation, maybe the faint hope that Daniel's cruelty was a nightmare she could still wake from. She stepped into the ballroom, her heart pounding, her hand resting protectively over her unborn child. The moment she entered, the room shifted. Conversations stilled, eyes widened, cameras turned, The image was cruelly cinematic, the discarded wife, pale but graceful in a modest dress, standing in the doorway while her husband paraded another woman under chandeliers. Daniel froze when he saw her. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. But then he laughed, loud, sharp, calculated. He pulled Cassandra closer, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Ah, look who finally crawled out of her bookstore," he sneered, his voice carrying across the marble floor. Laughter followed, low and vicious. Cassandra tilted her chin, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You should have stayed home, Ava. This isn't your world anymore." Ava's face burned, tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. The room spun with whispers and judgment. Some pitied her. Others enjoyed the spectacle. No one stepped forward to shield her. She was utterly alone. Her knees weakened, but she stood tall. Her voice trembled as she whispered, more to herself than to them, "You'll regret this." Daniel smirked, raising his glass. "The only regret I have is marrying you." The words sliced through her like a blade, and as the crowd gasped, Cassandra leaned in, whispering loud enough for all to hear, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take good care of him, and your baby's inheritance." It was too much. Ava's vision blurred. The chandeliers above fractured into cruel sparks of light. She stumbled, clutching her belly as a sharp pain seared through her. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. "She's going to collapse!" someone shouted. The last thing Ava saw before darkness claimed her was Daniel turning away, his arms still locked around Cassandra. He didn't move to help. He didn't even look back. And in that moment, something inside Ava broke. Not just her heart, but the last fragile thread of hope she'd held for him. When she opened her eyes again, she would no longer be the woman they humiliated. She would rise as the woman they would learn to fear. The world came back in fragments. White light, the antiseptic smell of a hospital room, the steady beeping of machines. Ava blinked, her body heavy, her heart heavier. She wasn't in the ballroom anymore. The humiliation, the whispers, the cruel laughter of Daniel and Cassandra, all of it had followed her here, echoing in her mind like a nightmare that refused to fade. Her hands flew to her belly. Relief swept through her when she felt a faint kick, a tiny reminder that her child was still fighting, still alive. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wasn't crying for herself anymore. She was crying for the life inside her, a life already burdened with betrayal before even taking its first breath. The nurse's voice was gentle. "You need rest, Mrs. Donovan. Stress like this could harm the baby." Mrs. Donovan, the title cut like glass. How could she still be Mrs. Donovan when her husband had paraded another woman before the city? How could she still carry his name after he had spat on every promise he ever made? Alone in the sterile room, Ava's spirit cracked. She sobbed quietly, afraid her pain would seep into her child. Images of Daniel flashed through her mind. The way he smiled when they first met, the way he touched her belly when she told him she was pregnant, the way he once whispered, "Forever." But those memories felt like lies now, poisoned by his cruelty. For hours, she lay awake, drowning in despair. Her phone buzzed once on the bedside table, a text from Daniel. "Don't make a scene again. You embarrassed me tonight." Her breath hitched. That was all he had to say. No concern for her health, no question about the baby. Just his ego, his image, his reputation. Another text followed minutes later. "Sign the divorce papers when you're discharged. Cassandra and I are moving forward. Don't drag this out." Her tears turned to silent screams. How could a man be so cold? How could the father of her child discard her like garbage, replace her as if she were nothing more than a placeholder? Ava pressed her hands to her face. The woman she used to be, the quiet bookstore clerk, the loving wife, the believer in fairy tales, felt like she was dying inside that hospital room. For the first time, she wondered if she could survive this. But then, in the stillness of the night, she heard it again. The soft, steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat from the monitor beside her. Life. Hope. A reason to endure. Her tears slowed, her breathing steadied, and something small but fierce flickered inside her. She realized she wasn't entirely powerless. Daniel thought she was weak. Cassandra thought she was disposable, but they didn't know her truth. They didn't know her bloodline, her legacy, her inheritance. They didn't know the storm she was capable of unleashing. For now, though, Ava let the world think she was broken. She let Daniel believe he had destroyed her. She let Cassandra laugh in her absence. because sometimes the greatest strength hides in silence. As dawn painted the hospital window in pale gold, Ava wiped her tears. The timid wife had been buried in the ashes of betrayal, and in her place, a new Ava Donovan would rise. 3 days after the hospital discharge, Ava returned to her small apartment. The walls felt closer than ever, suffocating her with memories of Daniel's rejection and Cassandra's venomous laughter. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands cradling her belly, and whispered, "I will not let you grow up in shame." Her phone buzzed again. A legal notice. Divorce papers already filed. Daniel's signature stamped across the page, as cold and final as the man himself. He hadn't wasted a second. Ava's chest tightened, rage mixing with despair. He wanted to erase her, erase their child, erase everything they once shared. But Daniel had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated her. A knock came at the door. Ava opened it cautiously, expecting another cruel delivery from Daniel's lawyer. Instead, she found a man in his 60s, tall and dignified, his gray hair slicked back, his suit tailored to perfection. His eyes softened when they landed on her. "Miss Mackenzie," he said, bowing his head slightly. "Or should I say Mrs. Donovan? Forgive the intrusion. My name is Harold Chambers. I was your late mother's attorney." The name struck like lightning. Her mother, Margaret Mackenzie. The woman who had raised Ava in simplicity while quietly guarding a truth Ava had never fully confronted. "I don't understand," Ava whispered. Harold stepped inside, setting a leather briefcase on the table. He opened it with careful precision, revealing stacks of documents. "Your mother never wanted you to grow up trapped by the weight of the Mackenzie empire. But she also knew this day might come, the day when you would need to stand tall, not just as her daughter, but as her heir." He slid a folder toward her. Inside were deeds, bank statements, and corporate records that painted a staggering picture. Ava wasn't merely comfortable. She was one of the wealthiest women in the country. Billions, entire corporations, properties around the globe, all hers. Ava's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. This can't be real." "It is very real," Harold assured her. "You control majority shares in Mackenzie Global Holdings. You have the power to decide its future, to wield influence that even your husband could only dream of." Husband. The word tasted bitter. Harold's eyes hardened. "Mrs. Donovan, forgive my bluntness, but the man you married has disgraced you. He believes you are powerless. He believes you will crawl away in silence. But you are not powerless. You are the storm he never saw coming." Ava pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Images of Daniel's sneer, Cassandra's mocking smile, the crowd's laughter, they replayed in her mind, but this time they fueled her fire. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt something stronger than despair. Power. "I don't want revenge," Ava murmured, though her voice trembled with conflict. Harold closed the briefcase and met her gaze firmly. "Revenge is not the word, justice is." Ava looked down at her belly, her child kicking gently as if reminding her of the future she needed to build. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her child's dignity, her mother's legacy, and her own rebirth. Her tears dried, her back straightened. The timid woman Daniel discarded was gone. In her place stood Ava Mackenzie Donovan, the billionaire heiress who would rewrite the story. And the first chapter of that story would begin with one simple, terrifying decision. She would take everything from Daniel Donovan. The morning after Harold revealed the truth, Ava sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers worth billions. Contracts, property deeds, shareholder documents. Her mother's legacy spread before her like a secret kingdom waiting for its queen. It was overwhelming, but also intoxicating. For the first time, Ava felt the weight of true power. Still, she knew one thing clearly. She couldn't do this alone. That afternoon, Harold returned, this time with another man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that turned heads without a word. His suit was impeccably cut, his dark eyes steady and unreadable. "Ava," Harold said gently, "this is Adrian Knight, CEO of Knight Enterprises, a close friend of your mother's and an ally you can trust." Adrian extended his hand. "It's an honor, Ava. Your mother spoke of you often." She hesitated before shaking it. His grip was firm, reassuring, the kind of handshake that conveyed both strength and respect. "My mother?" Ava asked softly, searching his face. Adrian nodded. "Margaret believed in you. She knew one day you would need guidance. She asked me to be there when the time came. Ava swallowed hard, emotions threatening to crack her composure. Guidance or protection? Both, Adrian said simply. The world you're about to step into is ruthless. Men like Daniel thrive on underestimating women. They think beauty means weakness. They think kindness means naivety. But you, Ava, you have something they'll never see coming. You have power and you have purpose. His words pierced her like arrows of truth. She wanted to believe them, but doubt clung stubbornly. I'm not ready, she whispered. I was a bookstore clerk, a housewife. I don't know how to run empires. Adrian leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. You don't have to know everything today. Power isn't about memorizing ledgers. It's about knowing who you are and who you refuse to be. You've already survived betrayal. That makes you stronger than half the men sitting in boardrooms right now. Ava blinked back tears. For the first time since Daniel's betrayal, someone was reminding her of her strength instead of mocking her weakness. Harold slid another folder across the table. We've already secured your position on the Mackenzie Global Holdings board. Your vote alone can shift millions. Daniel doesn't know yet, but when he does, he will learn just how wrong he was to discard you. The thought sent a thrill of fear and satisfaction through her veins. Daniel's smug face, Cassandra's cruel laugh, they would both crumble when the truth surfaced. Adrian rose, adjusting his jacket. I'll mentor you, teach you the rules they play by and how to break them. But you must decide now, Ava. Do you want to stay the woman they laughed at, or become the woman they'll fear? Her breath caught. She looked down at her belly, felt another tiny kick. Her child was a reminder of what was at stake. Not just revenge, but dignity, legacy, justice. Slowly, Ava stood. Her shoulders squared, her voice steadier than she felt. I choose to become the woman they'll fear. Adrian's lips curved in the faintest smile. Then let's begin. Outside the window, the city skyline glittered under the late afternoon sun. It looked different now, not like a cage of wealth and betrayal, but like a battlefield waiting for her first move. And Ava Donovan was ready to make it. Because the next time she crossed paths with Daniel and Cassandra, she wouldn't be the abandoned wife. She would be the billionaire heiress standing at his level, and ready to bring him down. The days that followed marked the death of the old Ava Donovan. Gone was the timid woman who hid behind bookstore shelves, the pregnant wife who once begged for scraps of affection. Under Adrian's guidance, Ava began to transform, not just in appearance, but in mind, spirit, and power. Their mornings started early. Adrian insisted on discipline. Power respects structure, he told her. At dawn, Ava was up, reviewing financial reports, learning the language of markets, mergers, and boardroom warfare. At first, the numbers blurred together, intimidating her. But soon she realized something. She was smarter than Daniel ever gave her credit for. With every lesson, she absorbed more, her confidence growing like steel forged in fire. By afternoon, Adrian arranged private sessions with coaches. A stylist replaced her modest wardrobe with tailored suits and elegant gowns that commanded respect. No more plain dresses or timid colors. Ava now walked in sharp lines of black, navy, and crimson. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked fragile. She looked like a woman who could walk into a boardroom and silence it with a single glance. She also trained her voice. A speech coach taught her how to project authority without shouting, how to hold silence long enough to make others squirm. They laughed at you once, Adrian reminded her, but the next time you speak, they'll hang on every word. At night, Ava poured herself into the documents Harold had left her. Contracts, shareholder votes, property deals. It was like piecing together a puzzle. The more she studied, the more she realized she had been blind for too long. Daniel's business genius was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. Half of his deals were built on lies, inflated promises, and Cassandra's manipulative whispers. His empire wasn't built on strength. It was rotting from the inside. One evening, exhausted but determined, Ava closed the last folder and looked across the room at Adrian. He's weak, she said, her voice calm but sharp. Daniel's entire empire depends on people not looking too closely. If I shine a light on him, he'll crumble. Adrian's eyes glinted with approval. Now you see the truth. He wasn't the powerful one. You were. He just convinced you otherwise. Ava's chest tightened, not with sorrow this time, but with fire. She remembered the humiliation at the gala, the way Cassandra sneered, the way Daniel laughed. Those memories no longer broke her. They fueled her. Her makeover wasn't just external, it was internal. Ava no longer cried over the man who betrayed her. She no longer wished for the past to return. That woman had died the night she collapsed under the chandeliers. Now, she was someone new. Someone dangerous. A week later, Adrian took her to her first major appearance. The lobby of McKinsey Global Holdings gleamed with marble and glass, executives striding across the floor with hurried steps. But when Ava entered, silence rippled through the building. Heads turned. Phones paused midair. Whispers followed her like shadows. Is that her, the Donovan wife? She looks different. Not just different, powerful. She stepped into the boardroom, her crimson suit blazing under the fluorescent lights. Daniel's allies sat waiting, smug and unsuspecting. They thought they were about to dismiss her as irrelevant. But Ava didn't flinch. She sat at the head of the table, her gaze steady, her voice calm as she declared, "My name is Ava Mackenzie Donovan, and as of today, I hold controlling shares in this company." Gasps filled the room. Executives exchanged stunned looks. The timid wife they mocked was gone. In her place stood a billionaire heiress, ready for war. And the first casualty would be Daniel Donovan himself. The boardroom was Daniel Donovan's favorite stage. He thrived on power, on the nervous glances of subordinates, on the way investors leaned forward when he spoke. To him, business was theater, and he was always the star. But today, the script had changed. Daniel swept into the room with Cassandra at his side, her perfume strong enough to announce her presence before she spoke. She perched next to him like a queen, smirking at the executives around the polished mahogany table. "Gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice rich with arrogance, "I've called this meeting to secure final approval for our expansion. With your support, Donovan Holdings will." He stopped. For the first time in years, silence cut him down mid-sentence. Every pair of eyes wasn't on him. They were on her. At the far end of the table sat Ava. She wasn't the fragile wife they remembered. She wasn't in a plain dress or hiding behind lowered eyes. She wore a tailored navy suit that hugged her frame with sharp elegance, her dark hair swept back to reveal eyes that glinted like steel. Her presence radiated authority, every inch the heiress she was born to be. Daniel blinked, his confidence faltering. "Ava, what the hell are you doing here?" Her voice was calm, steady, but it sliced through the room like a blade. "Exercising my rights." Confusion rippled through the investors. Ava opened a folder, sliding documents across the table. "As majority shareholder of McKinsey Global Holdings, I've come to inform you that this board answers to me now." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, executives flipping through the documents in disbelief. Daniel's face drained of color, his jaw tightening. "This is a joke," he snapped. "You don't belong here. You don't know the first thing about running a company." Ava leaned back, her gaze unwavering. "And yet, here I am, with more power in this room than you'll ever have." Laughter, low, nervous, bubbled among the board members. Not at her, but at him. Daniel Donovan, the man who had built his ego on dominance, was suddenly stripped bare in front of his peers. Cassandra tried to salvage him, her voice dripping with venom. "She's bluffing. Look at her. She doesn't have the strength to—" "Careful," Ava cut in, her tone icy. "You're sitting in a room full of men who sign your paychecks. Do you really want to advertise that your entire career depends on being someone's mistress?" The color drained from Cassandra's cheeks. The room went silent again, the kind of silence that crushes reputations. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. "You think you can humiliate me in my own boardroom?" Ava's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I don't need to humiliate you, Daniel. You've done that yourself." She stood, her heels clicking against the floor, her every step radiating dominance. "This company belongs to me now, and as my first executive decision, I'm auditing every deal you've signed in the last 2 years." The investors murmured with approval. Several even smiled. They weren't loyal to Daniel. They were loyal to money. And Ava, with her fortune and her resolve, was the future. Daniel's face twisted in rage, his voice cracking with fury. "You'll regret this, Ava." But Ava didn't flinch. She paused at the door, turning her head just enough to let her final words echo like thunder. "No, Daniel. You're the one who's going to regret underestimating me." And with that, she walked out, leaving Daniel Donovan drowning in his own silence. The night of the Sterling Foundation Gala was one of the most important events of the year. Every CEO, politician, and socialite who mattered was there, wrapped in designer gowns and tuxedos, parading under crystal chandeliers while photographers captured their every move. It was the kind of place where reputations were polished or destroyed in a single evening. Daniel Donovan arrived early, his arm wrapped tightly around Cassandra's waist. She wore a daring emerald gown that seemed designed to scream, "Look at me. I've won." Daniel basked in the flashing cameras, grinning like a man who believed he had conquered the world. "Smile," Cassandra whispered, tilting her head toward the photographers. "Tonight, they'll see us as the new power couple." Daniel chuckled. "Let them. Ava's gone. She'll never recover from what I did to her." But as the orchestra swelled and the guests filled the ballroom, the doors opened again, and silence fell like a crashing wave. Ava Donovan had arrived. She glided into the room on Adrian Knight's arm, the pair a vision of elegance and power. Ava's gown was midnight black, cut to perfection, the fabric shimmering under the lights like liquid silk. A diamond necklace glistened at her throat, catching every camera flash. Her hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture regal, her presence magnetic. The crowd gasped, then erupted into murmurs. "Is that her, the Donovan wife? She looks unrecognizable." "No, she looks unstoppable." Daniel froze, his smile faltering as though he had seen a ghost. Cassandra's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes narrowing with disbelief. Ava met Daniel's gaze across the ballroom, her expression calm, unbothered. She didn't flinch, she didn't cower. Instead, she lifted her chin, allowing the cameras to drink in her transformation. The woman he had humiliated was gone. In her place stood a queen. Adrian leaned down slightly, whispering so only she could hear. "They're watching you, Ava. Own this moment." And she did. Every step she took across the marble floor commanded attention. Guests parted instinctively, giving her space, as if they sensed something monumental was unfolding. Daniel tried to regain control. He forced a laugh, raising his glass. "Well, look who decided to crawl back." His voice was loud enough to draw attention, his words dripping with cruelty. Ava didn't falter. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried more power than his entire performance. "Crawl back," she said, her voice clear and smooth. "No, Daniel. I've risen above." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The orchestra quieted, all eyes locked on the confrontation unfolding in the center of the gala. Cassandra stepped forward, her tone mocking. "Don't embarrass yourself, Ava. You don't belong here anymore." But before Ava could respond, Adrian spoke, his voice calm yet commanding. "On the contrary, Ava belongs here more than anyone. She's not just a guest tonight, she's the major sponsor of this entire event." The revelation struck like thunder. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters whispered furiously into their recorders. The Sterling Foundation Gala was Ava's stage now, not Daniel's. Daniel's face paled, his bravado crumbling. Cassandra's smirk vanished. Ava turned gracefully to the reporters gathering nearby. "Tonight," she announced, "isn't about me. It's about building a future where betrayal and corruption no longer stand unpunished. And rest assured," her eyes locked onto Daniel, "every action has consequences." The crowd erupted in applause, some cheering, others whispering in awe. Ava had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had stolen the spotlight from Daniel in front of the very world he craved to impress. Daniel clenched his jaw, fury radiating from every pore. Cassandra's nails dug into his arm, and yet deep down, they both knew the truth. This was only the beginning, because Ava Donovan hadn't come to play. She had come to destroy. The gala had ended with Ava radiant in victory, her name on every guest's lips. Overnight, the press exploded with headlines. "Heiress returns in triumph," "Betrayed wife outshines husband and mistress," "Daniel Donovan loses spotlight to ex-wife." Daniel's phone buzzed non-stop the next morning. Investors pulled out of deals. Reporters demanded answers. His inbox overflowed with cancellations. By noon, the empire he had worked so hard to project was showing cracks. He hurled his phone across the office. "She humiliated me. In front of everyone." Cassandra, lounging on his leather sofa, rolled her eyes. "Then stop whining and do something about it." Daniel glared at her. "Do something? She's got billions behind her now. She's not just my ex-wife, she's a weapon. Adrian Knight is backing her. I can't touch her without burning myself." Cassandra rose, her emerald eyes cold. "You're Daniel Donovan. You don't back down, you fight. So fight dirty. If Ava wants to play queen, then let's remind everyone of her past. She was a nobody before you. Pregnant, fragile, working in a bookstore. We'll drag her back down into the mud. Daniel hesitated, but Cassandra pressed harder. Think about it. A smear campaign. Leak stories about her. Question her mental stability. Cast doubt on her ability to run McKenzie Holdings. If the press sees her as unstable, the board will panic. Investors will abandon her. His lips curled into a cruel smile. And who better to plant those stories than my beautiful, ruthless Cassandra? Within days, gossip columns churned out venom. Heiress too emotional to lead. Sources claim Ava Donovan collapsed at gala. Is she fit to rule? Unborn child at risk amid billionaire drama. The smear campaign spread like wildfire. Paparazzi hounded Ava outside her apartment. Reporters shouted cruel questions. Are you having a breakdown? Is your baby safe? Did you only marry Daniel for his money? Ava, however, didn't flinch. Under Adrian's coaching, she held her head high, her crimson lips curling into calm smiles as she walked past the vultures. When asked for comment, she simply replied, "The truth always outlasts lies." Still, the whispers stung. At night, she sat awake, feeling the weight of judgment pressing on her chest. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered Daniel's sneer, Cassandra's laugh, and the tiny heartbeat inside her. She couldn't afford to crumble again. One morning, Harold burst into her apartment with urgent news. "Ava, they've gone too far. Daniel leaked false financials to the press, painting you as reckless, but in his arrogance, he left a trail." He slammed a folder on the table. "We have the evidence." Ava's eyes sharpened. Inside the folder were contracts signed by Daniel, fraudulent, illegal, undeniable, proof that he had been cooking books for months. Adrian's voice was steel. "This is it. He wanted to destroy you with rumors. We'll destroy him with facts." Ava closed the folder slowly, her hand trembling not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of what she held. This wasn't just about reputation anymore. This was about bringing Daniel to his knees, legally and publicly. For the first time, she allowed herself a smile, not of joy, but of resolve. "If he wants war," she whispered, "then war is what he'll get." Daniel and Cassandra thought they had cornered her. They thought their lies would bury her. But what they didn't know was that Ava Donovan now held the weapon that could end Daniel's entire empire, and she was about to pull the trigger. The folder on Ava's table was more than paper. It was a weapon, a loaded gun aimed at Daniel Donovan's fragile empire. Each page detailed fraudulent deals, forged signatures, and inflated numbers that could ruin him overnight. Adrian sat across from her, his eyes sharp. "This isn't just evidence of dishonesty. It's criminal. If we release this at the right moment, Daniel won't just lose his investors. They'll face prison." Ava traced the edge of the folder, her jaw tight. For months, she had been the victim. Tonight, that role ended. "No mercy," she whispered. Harold adjusted his glasses. "Timing is everything. The quarterly investors' meeting is this Friday. Daniel plans to announce a new project, one built entirely on lies. If you reveal this evidence, then his empire collapses in front of the very people who trusted him." Ava felt the fire rise within her. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about justice. Daniel had paraded his mistress, mocked her as weak, and nearly destroyed her reputation. Now she would dismantle him piece by piece, and she would do it in public. Friday arrived. The ballroom of the Donovan Holdings Tower buzzed with anticipation. Cameras flashed as investors filled their seats, eager to hear Daniel's promises of expansion. Cassandra glided beside him, smug as ever, dripping in diamonds he had purchased with stolen money. Daniel strutted to the stage, his charisma on full display. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks the future of Donovan Holdings. A new project, a new era. Together, we will." The doors burst open. Ava entered, flanked by Adrian and Harold. The crowd turned, gasps rippling like thunder across the room. She was a vision of power in a white suit, radiating calm authority. Daniel faltered, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" Ava didn't answer him. Instead, she walked straight to the podium. The cameras swiveled, the reporters surged closer. She laid the folder on the lectern and opened it with deliberate precision. "My apologies for the interruption," she said smoothly, her voice carrying across the hall. "But before you commit another dollar to Donovan Holdings, you deserve the truth." The silence was suffocating. She lifted the first page. Fraudulent contracts, fake financial reports. deals signed under false pretenses, all orchestrated by Daniel Donovan. A collective gasp shook the room. Investors surged forward, demanding to see the documents. Reporters scribbled furiously. Daniel's face drained of blood, his mouth opening and closing like a trapped animal. "She's lying," he shouted, slamming his fist on the podium. "This is slander." Ava turned to him, her eyes cold as ice. "You should know better, Daniel. Every document carries your signature. Every lie has your name on it." She handed copies to the investors, their expressions twisting from shock to rage. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Words like lawsuit, criminal charges, and withdrawal echoed through the crowd. Cassandra's hand shook as she grabbed Daniel's arm. "Say something. Fix this." But Daniel had no words left. His empire was burning in front of him, and Ava was holding the torch. She closed the folder, her voice steady. "This company is built on corruption, and corruption always collapses. Choose wisely whom you trust with your future." The investors erupted, many standing to leave. Reporters swarmed the stage, cameras flashing. Daniel screamed after them, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Ava stepped down, her heels clicking with purpose. As she passed Daniel, she leaned close, her whisper sharp as glass. "This is only the beginning." Daniel's face twisted with fury, but beneath the rage was fear. For the first time he realized the truth. Ava Mackenzie Donovan wasn't just fighting back, she was winning. And the next move would destroy not only his company, but his entire life. That night, after dismantling Daniel in front of his investors, Ava returned to her penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline. The city glittered below, but her mind was not on the view. She stood at the window, her hand resting on her belly, lost in memories that burned like old scars. The humiliation at the gala. The stormy night he cast her into the rain. The text message that read like a knife. "Sign the divorce papers. Don't drag this out." Each memory replayed, cruel and vivid, reminding her of the woman she had once been. Weak, silent, begging for scraps of love. Her reflection in the glass looked different now, stronger, sharper, her eyes no longer soft but burning with quiet fire. But the ache of betrayal still lived beneath the surface. Adrian found her there, his voice low. "You fought brilliantly today. You showed them who you are." Ava didn't turn. "Then why do I still feel the pain?" He stepped closer, his presence grounding her. "Because scars don't disappear, Ava. They become part of us. But that's what makes you dangerous. Daniel has no scars. He's never endured what you endured. And that's why he'll never have your strength." She closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. Strength born from suffering. Power forged in pain. She thought of her mother, Margaret Mackenzie, the woman who had walked away from empires to raise her daughter in love. Margaret had known the cruelty of wealth, the hunger of men like Daniel. Perhaps she had seen this day coming all along. Ava whispered, almost to herself, "Mom, I wish you could see me now. I wish you could see what I've become." Tears welled, but they did not weaken her. They cleansed her. For the first time, she saw her tears not as proof of fragility, but as evidence of her humanity, something Daniel and Cassandra would never understand. Her phone buzzed. A new headline flashed across the screen. "Daniel Donovan, accused of fraud, faces investigation." Cassandra Moore linked to scandal. Ava exhaled slowly. Justice was beginning to take shape, but she knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. She walked to her desk, where the divorce papers still sat unsigned. She picked them up, staring at Daniel's cold signature scrawled across the bottom. For months, those papers had felt like a death sentence. Tonight, they felt like a weapon. She tore them in half, then into quarters, then into pieces so small they scattered like ashes across the floor. Adrian's eyes glinted, a symbolic gesture. "No," Ava said firmly, "a declaration. I am done mourning what I lost. From now on, I fight only for what I deserve, and for the justice my child deserves." She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle kick within. The baby wasn't just her reason to survive anymore. The baby was her reason to win. Her resolve solidified into steel. Daniel had stolen her trust. Cassandra had mocked her pain. But soon the world would see the truth. Ava Donovan wasn't just surviving betrayal, she was rewriting the story. She turned back to Adrian, her voice steady, almost chilling. "Tomorrow, we take the next step." Daniel thought today was the end of his empire. He has no idea how much further he's about to fall. Outside, thunder rumbled across the city as if echoing her vow. Because Ava Donovan wasn't finished. She was only getting started. Cassandra Moore had always thrived in the shadows, whispering poison into Daniel's ear, manipulating from behind the scenes. But after Ava's public return and Daniel's humiliation at the investors' meeting, Cassandra felt the ground slipping from under her designer heels. The press was relentless. Headlines screamed, "Mistress at the center of scandal." Paparazzi stalked her every move, hurling questions she could no longer dodge. "Cassandra, did you know about the fraud? Were you complicit? Are you the reason Daniel's empire is collapsing?" At first she laughed it off, flashing her dazzling smile and clinging tighter to Daniel in front of the cameras. But when she caught sight of herself on the news, her face splashed across screens as the other woman, she realized the narrative was turning against her. One evening, in their penthouse, Cassandra threw a crystal glass against the wall, shattering it into diamonds of rage. "This is your fault," she screamed at Daniel. "You promised me power, but now the whole city sees me as trash." Daniel paced, his tie loosened, sweat clinging to his temples. "Calm down, we'll get through this. I just need to silence Ava, make her look like the unstable one." "Silence her?" Cassandra's voice dripped with scorn. "You can't silence her. She's untouchable now. She has money, she has Adrian Knight, and she has the press eating out of her hand. Do you know what they call her online? The Phoenix Heiress." Daniel's eyes darkened with fury. But Cassandra wasn't done. "And do you know what they call me? The snake, the parasite, the gold digger who helped bring you down." Her voice cracked on the last word, her facade beginning to crumble. For the first time, Cassandra saw herself not as the glamorous victor, but as the disposable pawn. The thought chilled her. She grabbed Daniel's shoulders, shaking him. "You need to fix this. Do something. Buy off reporters, threaten Ava, pay whoever you have to. Just make it stop before I lose everything." Daniel shoved her away, his patience gone. "You think this is just about you? I could go to prison, Cassandra. Prison, and if I fall, you fall with me." The truth hit her like a punch. She had tied her fate to his. If Daniel burned, she would burn too. That night, Cassandra sat alone at her vanity, wiping away smeared lipstick and mascara. For the first time in years, she looked at herself without the armor of beauty. She saw fear in her reflection, real, gnawing fear. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When the house of cards falls, the mistress is always the first to go. Her blood ran cold. The next morning, Cassandra attempted her own counterattack. She arranged an exclusive interview with a glossy magazine, hoping to reclaim her narrative. Draped in couture, she painted herself as the misunderstood woman, the victim of Ava's vindictiveness. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she told the reporter, her voice trembling with rehearsed sincerity. But when the article went live, the backlash was immediate. Comments flooded social media. "Liar. She destroyed a family. Ava is the real victim." Cassandra slammed her laptop shut, her pulse racing. She had lost control of the story. Worse, she was losing Daniel. She caught the way he looked at her now, not as his glamorous partner, but as dead weight, dragging him deeper into ruin. And Cassandra Moore had never been dead weight. Her mind whirred with panic and calculation. If Daniel couldn't save her, maybe she needed to save herself, even if it meant betraying him first. Because when empires fall, survivors don't cling, they strike. The storm was building. Daniel's empire was crumbling, Cassandra was unraveling, but Ava knew the real blow had yet to land. What she had done so far was only the prelude. The finale would require something undeniable, something that even Daniel couldn't wriggle out of with charm or money. That something lay inside a slim flash drive Harold placed in her hand one late evening. His voice carried both gravity and satisfaction. "This is the golden evidence, Ava. It contains video recordings, bank transfers, and confidential emails, all proving Daniel orchestrated fraudulent deals. It's airtight. Once you release this, his career is over." Ava stared at the drive, the weight of it heavier than any diamond. "Where did you get it?" Harold allowed himself the faintest smile. "Your mother anticipated this possibility. She instructed her legal team years ago to monitor Daniel's activities once you married. She feared he'd take advantage of your kindness. She was right." Emotion tightened Ava's throat. Even from the grave, her mother was protecting her. She clutched the drive like a lifeline. "This is it then. This ends him." Adrian leaned against the window, arms crossed, his gaze locked on her. Once this goes public, Daniel won't just lose investors, he'll face prison. Are you ready for that? Ava exhaled slowly. He left me in the rain pregnant, Adrian. He mocked me, paraded his mistress in front of the world, and tried to destroy my dignity. He chose this war. I'm just finishing it. The next morning, Ava attended a press conference at the McKinsey Global headquarters. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Daniel had scheduled his own announcement, hoping to spin the narrative in his favor, but Ava moved first. She stepped to the podium, flawless in a sleek gray suit, her diamond earrings catching the lights. Her voice was steady as steel. For months, you've heard rumors and accusations. Today, I bring you proof. Proof that Daniel Donovan, my estranged husband, engaged in fraud, embezzlement, and illegal partnerships designed to enrich himself while deceiving investors. She plugged the flash drive into the projector. The screen behind her flickered to life. Emails appeared, Daniel's signature at the bottom of every deal, wire transfers snaking through offshore accounts. And finally, the killing blow, a video recording of Daniel himself, bragging to a partner about how easy it was to cook the books while his naive wife stayed clueless at home. The room erupted. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, investors gasped. The evidence was undeniable. Daniel stormed in halfway through the presentation, Cassandra trailing behind him like a wilted flower. His face turned crimson as the video played on loop for the crowd. "Turn it off," he shouted, but the microphones amplified his desperation. "This is fabricated, lies." Ava didn't even glance at him. She let the evidence speak for itself. The once untouchable Daniel Donovan now looked like a cornered animal, his empire collapsing under the weight of his own arrogance. Cassandra stepped back, her expression flickering between fear and fury. She knew what this meant, not just for Daniel, but for her too. Ava closed the presentation, her words final and devastating. "Fraud thrives in the dark. Today, we shine light. Let justice do the rest." The room exploded in questions. Lawyers rushed forward. Federal investigators were already on their way. Daniel's voice cracked as he tried to shout over the chaos, but no one listened anymore. Ava descended the stage, her head high, her every step echoing with triumph. Daniel's downfall had begun, and there was no saving him now. But Ava wasn't finished. The world would watch as she delivered the final blow that neither Daniel nor Cassandra could ever recover from. The Crystal Crown Gala was the event of the year, a gathering of power where reputations could rise to immortality or be shattered beyond repair. For weeks, society pages speculated who would attend, who would dazzle, who would dominate the spotlight. Daniel Donovan had planned to use the gala as his redemption. Despite the fraud scandal, despite Ava's evidence, he believed he could charm his way back into favor. He arrived in a sleek black tuxedo, Cassandra at his side in a gown dripping with emeralds. Together, they forced smiles for the cameras, pretending nothing had changed, but the whispers in the crowd betrayed them. There he is, the fraud. Why is she still with him? Doesn't she know her time is up? Pathetic. They think diamonds can cover disgrace. Daniel clenched his jaw, ignoring the murmurs. Cassandra kept her chin high, though her grip on his arm was tight, her nails digging into his skin. Then the doors opened. A hush swept across the ballroom as Ava entered, every eye drawn to her. She wore a floor-length crimson gown that clung to her with effortless grace, each step radiating power. On her arm was Adrian Knight, his presence solid, commanding. Together, they were the embodiment of elegance and authority. The cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters shouted her name. The crowd shifted toward her, leaving Daniel and Cassandra standing in the shadows they once dominated. Ava moved with the poise of a queen reclaiming her throne. When she reached the center of the ballroom, the orchestra fell silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause in reverence. Daniel forced a laugh, his voice too loud. "Well, well. The runaway wife finally returns for more attention." Ava's smile was cool, unshaken. "Attention isn't what I came for, Daniel. The truth is." Gasps rippled through the audience. Cassandra stiffened, her emerald earrings trembling as though they too sensed danger. Ava raised her hand. A projector flickered to life against the marble wall, displaying footage from the press conference. The forged contracts, the hidden bank accounts, the damning video of Daniel boasting about his fraud. The crowd erupted in whispers, shock, and disgust. Daniel's face turned crimson. "Turn that off," he bellowed, but no one moved. The evidence was too powerful, the audience too captivated. Cassandra tried to salvage the moment. This is slander, fabricated lies spread by a bitter woman who couldn't keep her husband. Ava turned to her slowly, her eyes sharp as steel. No, Cassandra, this isn't about keeping a husband, it's about exposing thieves who build their lives on betrayal. The room roared with approval. Applause broke out, reporters shouting questions, investors shaking their heads at Daniel with disgust. Ava stepped closer, her voice steady and cutting. Daniel, you once told me I would regret ever standing against you. Tonight, the only regret in this room belongs to you, and the woman who sold her dignity to stand beside you. The crowd gasped. Cassandra's face blanched, her mask cracking in front of the world. Daniel sputtered, his fists clenching, but no words came. Adrian placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, steady but proud. She had done it. She had turned the stage Daniel once dominated into his execution ground. And yet, Ava knew this was not the final blow. Not yet. Because tonight's gala wasn't just about exposing the fraud. It was about watching the frauds themselves collapse under the weight of their own sins. The Crystal Crown Gala ended in chaos. Reporters swarmed Daniel Donovan like vultures circling carrion. Microphones shoved into his face, questions shouted over one another. Did you forge the contracts? Are you going to prison? How much did your mistress know? Daniel's answers were frantic, his once polished charm cracking under the weight of panic. Lies, all of it. Ava is trying to ruin me because she's bitter. I'm still in control, do you hear me? I'm still in control. But no one believed him anymore. By the following week, his downfall was complete. Investors withdrew every cent. Partners cut ties. His accounts were frozen under federal investigation. The lavish penthouse he flaunted became a prison of unpaid bills and unanswered calls. Daniel Donovan, once the rising star of Chicago's corporate world, was now nothing more than a headline. Disgraced executive faces charges. And Cassandra Moore was watching her golden life unravel with him. She had sacrificed her reputation to stand at Daniel's side. Now the very society she craved spat her name like poison. Restaurants refused her reservations. Former friends blocked her calls. Paparazzi chased her through alleys, their voices cruel. Mistress on the run. Snake in emeralds. Cassandra's mask of glamour shattered. She screamed at Daniel in the dim penthouse, her eyes wild, her voice shrill. You said we'd be unstoppable. You said she was weak. Daniel raked his hands through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. I didn't know she was Mackenzie's heiress. How was I supposed to fight billions? Her laugh was bitter, broken. You didn't just lose to her money, you lost to her strength. She's stronger than both of us, Daniel, and now she'll watch us burn. The knock at the door was sharp, final. 2 federal agents entered, their badges flashing. Mr. Donovan, you're under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. You need to come with us. Daniel froze, his face draining of blood. No, this can't be happening. Cassandra stepped back, her heart racing. In that moment she made her choice. She wouldn't go down with him. Officers, she said quickly, her voice trembling but eager. I can help. I have information, proof. I was only following his lead. Daniel orchestrated everything. Daniel spun toward her, betrayal twisting his features. Cassandra, shut up! But she didn't. Her survival instinct was stronger than loyalty. Check his private accounts, his offshore holdings. He bragged about everything. I can testify. The agents exchanged a look. One nodded. We'll be in touch. Daniel lunged at her, his face red with rage. You traitor! Cassandra's eyes burned with tears, but her voice was ice. I'm not going to prison for you, Daniel. You were supposed to save me. Instead, you ruined me. Now you can rot alone. The agents dragged him out, his shouts echoing down the hall. Cassandra collapsed against the wall, trembling. She had betrayed the only man who ever gave her a taste of power, but in the end, she had no choice. Daniel Donovan's empire was ashes, and she refused to be buried with it. Yet deep down, Cassandra knew her betrayal wouldn't save her. The city had already marked her. The spotlight she once craved now burned her alive. And somewhere across town, Ava Donovan watched the news footage, her face calm, her heart steady. The collapse was almost complete. But Ava wasn't satisfied yet. Daniel and Cassandra still had more to lose, and she was going to make sure they lost it all. The storm had passed. Daniel was in custody, Cassandra disgraced, and Ava Donovan stood on the ashes of betrayal, stronger than she had ever imagined. Yet even as the world buzzed with her triumph, Ava's focus turned inward, to the life she had carried through every moment of humiliation, despair, and war. The contractions came late one night, sharp waves that doubled her over as she clutched the edge of her bed. Adrian rushed her to the hospital, his hand never leaving hers. Hours blurred together, nurses moving swiftly, monitors beeping, Ava's breath coming in ragged gasps. At dawn, a cry pierced the room, a baby's cry. Strong, insistent, alive. Ava's tears spilled freely as the nurse laid the tiny bundle on her chest. "It's a boy," the nurse whispered. "Her son. Perfect, fragile, his tiny fingers curling around hers with surprising strength." Ava kissed his forehead, sobbing softly. "You're safe now. You'll never know the pain I endured. You'll grow up knowing love, not betrayal." Adrian stood nearby, silent but moved. For the first time, Ava saw his guarded expression soften completely. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "You've given him more than life, Ava. You've given him a legacy. He will know strength because he'll see it in you." The days that followed were quiet but profound. The tabloids that once mocked her now hailed her as a symbol of resilience. The Phoenix heiress welcomes new life. Gifts arrived from business leaders and charities alike. Strangers wrote letters telling her how her story gave them courage to rise from their own heartbreaks. But Ava didn't bask in the glory. She spent her days with her son, rocking him in the soft glow of her penthouse nursery, whispering promises of a future brighter than her past. Every kick she had once felt in despair was now a reminder of the life she had protected, the reason she had endured. Still, Ava knew healing wasn't just about motherhood. It was about purpose. And so, only weeks after giving birth, she stood on a stage once more. This time, not in a gala dripping with jewels, but in a modest hall filled with women, children, and families in need. She announced the launch of the Margaret Foundation, named after her mother. "This foundation," she declared, her son's photograph on the podium beside her, "is dedicated to every woman who has been silenced, every child born into struggle, every soul told they were powerless. You are not powerless. You are never powerless." The crowd erupted in applause, tears glistening in the eyes of those who saw in Ava not just a billionaire, but a survivor who chose to lift others with her. That night, holding her son in her arms, Ava gazed out over the city skyline. She no longer saw a battlefield, she saw a future, one built not on revenge, but on justice, love, and healing. And yet, deep inside, she knew the final chapter had not been written. Daniel's trial loomed. Cassandra's betrayal hung in the air. The world would soon demand closure, and Ava was ready to deliver it. She kissed her son's forehead, whispering, "The worst is behind us, but tomorrow the world will see what happens when truth finally wins." Because Ava Donovan wasn't just healed, she was whole, and her story was about to end exactly as it should, on her terms. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with reporters, spectators, and flashes of cameras. For weeks, Chicago had waited for this moment, the trial of Daniel Donovan. Once hailed as a rising business star, now he stood accused of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. His empire was gone, his reputation scorched, and tonight the verdict would seal his fate. Ava sat in the front row, poised in a navy dress, her presence calm but commanding. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She was simply there to witness justice. Adrian sat beside her, a steady hand of support, while her son was safe at home with a caretaker. Daniel looked nothing like the man who once strutted through galas. His tailored suits were replaced by a wrinkled blazer, his eyes hollow, his arrogance stripped away. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, a collective gasp filled the room. Daniel's shoulders sagged as the sentence followed. 15 years in federal prison. Cameras clicked furiously. Daniel turned his head, his gaze landing on Ava. For a moment, his lips parted, as if he wanted to beg, to plead. But Ava met his eyes with quiet strength, and he knew there was no mercy left for him. Guards led him away, his voice breaking into incoherent shouts. The mighty had fallen, and the world was watching. But Daniel wasn't the only one destroyed. Cassandra Moore sat 2 rows back, her face pale, her once immaculate hair disheveled. When she had agreed to testify against Daniel, she believed she could save herself. Instead, her name became synonymous with betrayal. No company would hire her, no society circle would welcome her. Her so-called friends abandoned her. Her image, once polished and enviable, was now plastered across tabloids with headlines like "Mistress Turned Informant" and "From Diamonds to Dust." As the verdict echoed through the courtroom, Cassandra's mask cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, her sobs ignored by everyone around her. She had gambled everything on Daniel's promises, and in the end, she lost it all. When Ava left the courthouse, the press surged forward, microphones thrust toward her, cameras flashing. "Mrs. Donovan, how do you feel about the verdict? What message do you have for women who have been betrayed like you? Do you believe justice was served?" Ava paused, her face calm under the blinding lights. "Justice isn't about revenge," she said firmly. "It's about truth. Today, the truth won." The crowd erupted with applause, her words carried across the nation's headlines. Months later, Ava stood once more on a stage, this time at the grand opening of the Margaret Foundation Center, a refuge for women and children escaping abuse and betrayal. Beside her stood Adrian, his hand brushing against hers in quiet solidarity. Behind her, a mural of her mother watched over the room, a reminder of love and resilience. Ava spoke to the gathered crowd, her son resting peacefully in her arms. "We cannot control what others do to us. We cannot stop betrayal, cruelty, or greed, but we can control what we do with our pain. We can turn it into strength, we can turn it into hope, and we can make sure the next generation never suffers the way we did." Tears shone in the eyes of those listening. For them, Ava was no longer just a billionaire heiress. She was a symbol of healing, of triumph, of survival. She closed her speech with a quote her mother once underlined in a book of philosophy, a quote she now lived by: "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Marcus Aurelius. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Cameras captured the image of Ava Donovan, her son in her arms, her future radiant before her. The betrayed wife had become the conqueror. The broken woman had become unbreakable, and her story would live forever, not as tragedy, but as triumph. So my friends, that's how the story closes. And if you're still here with me right now, it must mean something in this journey touched your heart in a real way. Maybe it reminded you of a time you felt broken. Maybe it showed you that even in betrayal, even in pain, there is always a way to rise again. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is what Ava's journey teaches us. We cannot control the cruelty of others, but we can choose how we respond. Pain does not have to end us. It can shape us into something unshakable. If this story gave you hope, let it be a reminder that your scars are not weakness. They are proof you survived. Proof you're stronger than you think. Now, if you felt even a little inspired tonight, I ask you, hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel. Because together, we can turn stories of heartbreak into stories of strength. And who knows, maybe your story is the next one waiting to be told.